Good morning, everybody. I'll let everybody log on. I'm going to finish up. This is my last video for the week. Unless something major comes up, I may do a video, post the results of what happens with Pastor James Coates. We're going to get into, like I promised, we're going to get into President Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's meeting yesterday. What they went over, what everybody needs to know. Canadian, American alike, I'd sure like to get this out there. Big issues here. We start with that meeting. First and foremost is American Indian versus First Nations. I start there because Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau get into talks about all these things they plan to do with energy transition and everything else. This is very important, not only for all Canadians, as a lot know, but it's for Americans to understand something. There's a huge difference between Canada and USA, and that all goes back to colonialism. The American Indian and the First Nations people are all represented one people. Their regions overlap, their boundary territories, when you look at official maps, do not respect the border of Canada-USA. And there is a deal in place that they're allowed to flow through that. However, there's a big problem here. American Indians are completely settled in the United States. They enjoy full self-government, full self-determination, and they're protected through the federal government. We do see federal governments attempting to take acquisitions of land or make deals with companies on behalf of the American Indian. In Canada, it's completely different. The First Nations peoples of Canada are restricted to a very small reserve. We have what's called Crown land in Canada. There's a federal portion and a provincial portion. There's even ceded and unceded land, meaning there's outstanding claims with the government of Canada. They've never settled. They've stuck with colonialism, not like the Americans where they settled absolutely since 1971, finalized in 1975 under President Ford. That's never happened in Canada. We have what's called Crown land, and it's to finally settle, but they don't settle. They've never settled. The decades continue to go, and they continue to absolutely impose serious human rights violations on the First Nations peoples here in Canada. We are nothing like the U.S. We're not even close. The monumental amount of work the United States of America has done and completed, again, over 5 decades worth, Canada isn't even close to that, never has been, and has no intentions of ever getting there. Joe Biden talks with Justin Trudeau. He thinks somehow they're going to make deals. 70% of Canada sits as Crown land, meaning government won't deal with those First Nations people, won't settle the claims. They're tremendously getting smaller and smaller as Canada expands larger and larger, increasing to mass immigration. Nothing even remotely close to the United States to drive wages down, and absolutely, which they already are, several provinces are breaching the USMCA. That's what Biden isn't apparently understanding right now, but it won't matter because these things are all going to come forward because there were protections put in place with both Democrat and Republican senators. One, Wyden, he's was heavy into that portion of the USMCA. Democrats in power. Joe Biden's going to hear all about this anyway. Second major thing when we get into energy transition and why Canada can't compete with the USA or move forward on this file the same way, and to do so is only going to ruin Canada's economy, is nuclear proliferation versus non-proliferation. Canada is non-proliferation. USA is proliferation. Now, right here in my region and the one beside me, Saskatchewan, and the Northwest Territories, we have the world's highest quality, best source of naturally enriched uranium in the world, bar none. Our fuel source is absolutely the highest quality. Much of the nuclear arsenal of the United States of America comes from Saskatchewan. That enriched uranium was absolutely utilized for the United States, as well as a lot of your fully enriched nuclear reactors where you have full fission. We're not even allowed to even attempt that in Canada. We are non-proliferation. Only 5 countries are proliferation countries, and USA is one of them. The rest of the world is not. There's several nations who got into it post-World War II, before those binding laws came into place. I believe upwards of 9. Canada isn't one of them. We're non-proliferation. We will never, ever be able to yield in nuclear anywhere close to what USA can, unless we're granted proliferation. And, that takes 5. If USA backed us, maybe, or they sponsored us in reactors, real reactors, not the jokes the politicians are putting out in small boat reactors that the USA utilizes, and to just laugh at Canada trying to put that all around on the 49th parallel, which gets into the third issue here on Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau talking energy transition. The 49th parallel. Another key issue about the 49th parallel is the major change in temperature here and the climate we go through. Americans died. Texas is in all kinds of trouble right now in a major emergency, and I have lots of friends in Texas. It's really traumatic. There's even employment opportunity if I wanted to go down south, but can't do it this time around. Gonna head east for my political reasons. But the 49th parallel, there is a massive temperature change on that tilt of the earth. It gets us great, just like Alaska, we get great sunlight at key times, but then there's the opposite flex of the earth where we're in the dark period. Much, much worse than most of the states of the United States. The temperature fluctuation between our seasons is a 100-degree guarantee, which doesn't make sense to the average American because they have much more than that because we use 2 different standard measurements. If we go the other way, if you were to adopt our temperature gauge, you'd understand that that is major, and a major on the cold spectrum for a long, long period of time. Long seasons. Our winters overlap our spring. Our winters clearly overlap into our fall as well too. So we are under extreme temperature, limiting our ability to utilize the same transitional approaches or creating new energies that a lot of the world will be able to do, but it limits those in the 49th parallel and above to using fossil fuels. There is no substitution viable. We can play this game with the United States. We can lie to ourselves. We can go forward to, we can do all this. All you're going to see is a lot of people freezing to death. You think Texas is bad? Imagine, just take that example. I know the scale doesn't work the same in minus temperatures, but your minus 30 measures are minus 30. A temperature never seen in Texas, most of the states ever. Minus 30 can be an average temperature for several months right here in Canada. It's not uncommon. It goes on all the time. We have major cold snaps that clearly take us through there. February, March, we just went through one. Everybody knows it here in my region. We just went through a 2-week period of that. We're enjoying some reprieve right now, but the reality is we can't enter that transition. We can't have the same system of harvesting for energy to make batteries viable enough. Technology isn't there yet. There's no solar that's going to yield. There never has been in Canada. Not in my region. I can go through my region and prove to you we've had zero yield on all our solar farms every winter since the dawn of it. Since the dawn of it. We've had to scrap entire solar farms because of this. There's some utilization of wind, but again, there's all kinds of problems with that. We don't have that steady flow of wind. We have extremely windy where we can't run them, or we don't have any wind at all. It's very limited to what windows of utilization. Now in UK, we look at UK, they can utilize that. In Northern Ireland, off the coast, they want to, infect the waters with all those platforms. It will work for them. That doesn't work for us here in Canada. There is no place that's viable like that. There's a time period for that. During summer months, in a calm summer period, but 3/4 of the year we can't really utilize that either. They talk about biomass. Now there's a transition of chopping down all our forests, which absolutely, again, go back to the carbon capture of the world. You're getting into more just like South America trying to protect the rainforests. We got all that up here in Canada too. The United States does not compare whatsoever. Because again, you've settled all your land claims with your American Indians. There is no unceded land in America. You've established large reserves, 500 times larger than your northern neighbors, Canada. We oppress our First Nations so very badly, worse than anything in modern history right now. Your Black Lives Matter is this big compared to the First Nations here in Canada. It's that much difference. I know Americans are afraid on the spectrum that if they get into the narrative that, and they don't like UNDRIP either, they've chosen to settle their claims. They don't want to get into those narratives because they're afraid of liability coming from their past indiscretions with the American Indian. But it doesn't substitute for absolute human atrocities committed today. This is beyond racism of the fact of American slavery and history. It's literally imagine caging African Americans. Let's say you abolish slavery, but you cage them in small little preserves and say, you will get a monthly check of $500-$600. Imagine the projects and that being caged and no African American allowed out of the projects to do anything. Here's a monthly check of $500-$600. Make it work for you. That's what they do here in Canada. There's no viability of reserves unless they were fortunate enough to be on areas we see in our northern half, of course, through the oil sands. We see those reserves doing very well, but then we see other reserves with zero resources at all doing tremendously bad with larger populations. Blood reserve down south, prime example. Huge disparity, huge human rights violations. Nothing seen in the modern USA today. Canada keeps this absolutely quiet. It was the abuse of colonialism, something Americans never adopted. They went independent. They fought back against it. Americans don't understand this concept. They haven't experienced it. They think Canada operates, which it does as a nation, but their crown power is utilized absolutely by the politicians. They've been told to settle those claims. That power was given by none other than USA in 1946, post-World War II. They said, settle all this stuff, get it done, we're removing colonialism. Our politicians at the time said, no, we're going to keep that power for ourselves. Laws they do internationally, they remove that. But if you pull any act or bill, even made today, any region you pick, or in the country of Canada, you will find that crown power is in full force. And when you chase where that goes, it goes right to the Prime Minister. They utilize a bunch of names. Americans think that is somehow to do with crown and some kind of respect to the Queen. The Queen doesn't have anything to do. The 95-year-old Queen has zero to do with any of the acts and bills made in Canada. It's absolutely all of our politicians. They hide behind that fact. They do it very autocratically, 3 times as bad as Russia, because 2/3 of our rights enshrined, just like the United States, just like USSR, the former USSR, Russia Federation, its 85 regions, they have codified rights in their regional constitutions, just like USA and your 50 states. We don't have that in Canada. We have only one constitution federally. It was told to outline that. Post-World War II, that was supposed to happen absolutely by 1952, but America never kept up with it, neither did the former Soviet Union. You imposed constitutions all over the world in Axis powers. You fixed a lot of regions of the world, but you didn't, neither of you came to deal with Canada. You didn't go over after King George died. They had started, but they didn't finish in 1952. So we didn't get any constitutions in the provinces. The power of all our provincial, which would be your state governor. Imagine giving every 50 state governor the power to rescind all state constitutions, and then saying the power over 2/3 of the rights of the people of America that are enshrined in those regional constitutions have now been absolutely removed. Your governor and whatever legislative assembly that's crafted runs full autocratic, meaning whatever that elected governor decides, he has absolute power. He decides individuals' rights on that 2/3 outside of the federal system. So Americans and Russians, I know they go at each other. I just saw Putin doing it again. I know the USA does it with Russia. Maybe there's reasons why both have each other's, anti-interest at heart. But the reality is Canada's much worse, and much more worsely designed, especially with embedded colonialism that you made illegal, Americans made illegal, but yet it's okay for some reason for Canada to operate like this, but not the rest of the world. But you absolutely outlawed, and so did Russia. You guys made major moves to outlaw that. You had the Convention of Decolonization. You did much works with that. You've helped with Africa. Africa's gone through that transition, and you limited the United Kingdom. You absolutely limited Spain. You limited France. They signed on. You made the United Nations. But Canada and several other nations still operate that way, and those politicians are empowered to do so, and you do nothing about it. And then, you want to do all these deals, but us, the people of Canada, have absolutely no say in anything at all. And you may think, well, that's great for your interests, but how is that going to benefit Canadians? And when we talk about atrocities, what are going to be the atrocities committed against the Canadian people by their government through foreign interference, which is absolutely what's going to happen with Joe Biden here if he continues on this path, thinking that Canadians somehow have a say. Going into further now, the bread and butter of this, to even go further right now, that Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau meeting, they went into absolutely the Michaels in China being detained. And Joe Biden referenced, we're going to help. USA is absolutely limited against China on that, unless there's some kind of declaration of war. Will it help if they were to throw that negotiation? Sure. But we need to highlight something here today, President Joe Biden and Americans and Canadians. Right here in my region, Alberta, Canada, there is a pastor in prison today. We're going to find out if the government of Alberta is going to release him. He has been absolutely arrested and put into prison for practicing his religion during COVID, not committing any crime except for breaking the federal and Alberta Health Act of 1919. Two joint acts that absolutely the governments, both provincially and federally, and both opposition parties are absolutely using to keep this pastor in jail. Now, there are all kinds of businesses who have broken the same laws. They've been fined. Not a one's been put in prison. Not a one. But on religious grounds, the government deems that it's proper to place a pastor in prison, but all businesses breaking the lockdowns get fined, and now we're seeing those fines get thrown out. It's a human rights violation any way you look at this. there's even more data that's going to be coming forward. I'm going to be submitting post today if that pastor is not released. And when I say released, I mean released with no conditions whatsoever. There's a major difference in criminal code and criminal code actions of prosecution between Canada and the USA, and this gets back into colonialism too. I know I experienced it. Several years ago, I had the living hell beat out of me for no good reason. I was put in a breach of conditional release, going through a divorce, a bad divorce. I was beaten so bad they broke my bones, and I was put in prison. Now, there was video of the event. I was charged for assault, and I was thrown in prison. I was incarcerated for several weeks, and I was held there, body badly busted up. I didn't get any medical attention. That's where I was put. I was fortunate. Those inmates in general population were absolutely very kind to me right across the board. Nobody gave me a hard time. Upon my release of that and going on forward to court, when the evidence came out, the prosecution agreed to drop all charges, which there were many indictments against me. And they agreed to drop it, but in Canada, when you're poor and you have no money, they get you to agree to a no contest situation where you can't sue. There's a lot of provisions in the United States where you can sue for the actions of prosecutors. That is very limited in Canada. So is it for our health system. So is it for a great amount of things. You're insured in your pensions. We're not insured in our pensions here. Private sector goes belly up, cashes out employee pensions after decades. There is nothing in place to protect anybody with their pensions here in Canada. They can be robbed, stolen, sent overseas, long gone. We don't have the same legal system as you. Don't even have the same protections. And right now, a gross human rights violation, a fundamental human right of religion. Business is a civil right, just like the USA. You have it enshrined in your states. It's not a federal power. Same with Canada, it's not a federal power. But they choose to administer fines, and then they drop those fines or don't enforce them. But yet a pastor operating his Congress and having people come in to practice their religion gets put in prison. But a business owner stays open, having people come in during lockdowns, and then he's only fined, or she, and there's many of them, or ignored completely, entirely. Two different standards, completely. A massive human rights violation. Canadians are calling out, you wouldn't believe it, Americans, Canadians across the board, majority, calling for imprisoning all these people. And it's just unbelievable. If you look at my poll done on Twitter with absolute citizens, Putin's not too happy about it. He's speaking up again against foreign influence, which is sort of what I did. I did notify the Russian government that I was going to be soliciting their citizens, and I did. I solicited 150 real credible citizens who we all voted who's the most autocratic, USA, Russia, or Canada. Did that poll across the USA, real Democrats, real Republicans. I chased everybody's profile to make sure they're actual citizens. They have a long track record on Twitter. Did the same for Russia and Russian. Did the same for Canada. Resounding results. Almost all Americans say Russia's the most autocratic. Russia says USA is the most autocratic. You know what Canadians say? First, it was split three ways. Almost 1/3 each. But the highest being a little over 1/3, Canadians said Canada was the most autocratic. Then the other third, just under a third, say United States of America is the most autocratic. And then below that, they say Russia's the most autocratic. Russia won the vote for most autocratic because more Americans responded to the poll than any other, and I actually polled in relation to countries' population size to get an actual feel of an entirely related scale to size. And The reality is, majority voted Russia. USA came in second place. Very, very close. And had the poll been equal in number, it probably would have been 50-50 USA and Russia. But the reality is the most autocratic out of all those three nations is absolutely Canada. Colonial power. For Americans wondering why and where Putin got the idea to add his amendments for no term limits, just done in 2020, no term limits, and all kinds of changes to the presidency and prime ministership. He's embedded Canada's colonial powers, embedded in our federal constitution, inside his federal constitution, strengthening his controls. He doesn't use the terms of colonialism. He's really direct, and he really uses it as named positions, very open, transparent. I'm adopting those particular colonial powers in a presidential system, so it's 100% legal. Nobody has a problem with Canada, so I'm going to do it too. And he only did federal administration of powers. Canada does that federally with absolutely no state powers codified in any constitution whatsoever. Every state in the USA has a constitution. There are 0 constitutions in Canada, not since 1867. Again, nobody wants to put any in because they're allowed to lie to all the people. They're allowed to do whatever they want with no restrictions whatsoever, no checks and balances, and an ultimate power that leads back to the Prime Minister, literally putting a crown on their head. The old jokes of King Ralph Klein, I know for Texans, they understand that term. They even published it too. It was a big joke. We talk about the Tukes. There's nothing funny or a joke about autocracy. There's nothing funny about that. And there's nothing funny about Joe Biden thinking that somehow Trudeau's a great and wonderful man. Not that Aaron O'Toole's a great and wonderful man either. All the parties live for this ultimate autocratic power. And once broken down, there will be publications coming. This will get released out to the international community of legal academics. I'm already out there largely now. I've already made all kinds of friends all over Africa, in many African nations, the best of the best. I've got to be and have been very fortunate to be in the best academic institutions in the world. It's just been an incredible journey. This is what people need to know. More and more will come forward, but this is the travesty of the Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau sit down where they talk about all these things, yet Canada can't compete on any of those levels. And little does Biden know Trudeau's an autocrat dictator. Any elected official who comes forward federally is an autocratic dictator. Much worse than Russia by a large, large margin. Americans obviously don't know that across the board. Russians don't know that across the board. And the reason why, they've never been educated in this. They've had colonialism remove both governments, regardless of the communist system in place before, into the Republic of now or the Republic of the USA, who went independent a very long time ago. You think colonialism's gone, but you will find it absolutely embedded in every bill and act ever legislated in any province or the federal parliament as a whole. That's the truth. And politicians continue to do it. When they go in the international community, they withhold all that from you. You all get to work on acts. One of such is on independence, actually. And that one was done internationally. No reference at all to any crown or any of these powers, because it was done internationally and Canada didn't want you to know the absolute truth. But you can publicly go, anybody can pull any act or bill made today in Canada or prior history or any new ones, and you will find they all absolutely empower all these crown rights. They use Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, but it's actually Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister, currently sitting. And any reference to Governor General, Lieutenant Governor, Privy Council, the appointed Senate, it is all crown power of absolute colonialism. We don't have any say over acts or bills. The only power Canadians truly have is a vote every 4 years, if that's held intact. That's all Canadians have. Not the same in Russia, not the same in USA. Major protections, major democracy, state powers, Russia regional powers that are not afforded in Canada. 2/3 of the rights that all Americans enjoy, Canadians don't have. They're subject to a premier anytime they want, polling and restricting those. And even the limited ones we are protected federally, like freedom of religion, just like the USA. Well, we got a pastor in prison today. He's been in jail for a number of weeks, and he's still there. They don't throw any business owners in jail. In fact, they fine them, but then they throw away the fines. Don't put anybody else in jail, only religious practitioners. Unfortunate, but that's a Charter of Rights and Freedom, and it's also a world-binding law USA put in 1948. World's supposed to practice it. China gets away with it because they are a UNSC member and one of the binding five. And the Uyghur Muslims, I say Uyghur, but it's Uyghur, I guess. But that might not even be the actual pronunciation. I should probably talk to one of those Muslims, hear it out of their own tongue. But with the Uyghurs, that's exactly what's being practiced right here in Alberta with this pastor. It is no different. It is all about his religion. They want to eradicate religion here in Canada. They don't care about world laws. And then they want you to go fight for the Michaels, which I agree with, but how are you going to do that with China when I'm going to be writing a letter to the UNSC 5 talking about a jailed pastor right here in Alberta? And I'm watching today too. If those conditions, if there's a conditional release, i.e. they're criminalizing him, that's going forward with the human rights too. So people are watching you, Jason Kenney, Rachel Notley, Aaron O'Toole, and Justin Trudeau. You're the official leadership in this region, Alberta, and federally in Canada. Aaron O'Toole, opposition. Rachel Notley, NDP, opposition in Alberta. You're all liable and responsible. And until I see any of you speaking out against this, this is what's going forward. And if you think you get a free pass or I'm some kind of joke, think again. These are serious laws and human rights violations. You can't criticize China no matter how many thousands of Uyghur Muslims they're incarcerating. You incarcerated one pastor. One. You didn't incarcerate any business owners who did the same thing. You didn't. You imprisoned a pastor on religious because you don't like religion. You want to eradicate Christianity. That's what Jason Kenney, Justin Trudeau, Rachel Notley, and Aaron O'Toole did. Not one of them spoke out against it. They think this is fine. It's normal to jail the pastor, but it's bad that the Michaels are in prison in China or the Uyghur Muslims are going through re-education. It's terrible, everybody. Absolutely wrong. Share, share, share. This is my video today. Getting back to my major works going forward. We will see. I may do one more video if they don't release them or they release them with conditions. We're going to talk about that. Thanks, everybody. Get it shared. Get it out there. This is the education that needs to go out there. Thank you. Bye.